When you think of Single Track, 989 Studios, Eat, Sleep, Play, or Incognito Entertainment, you probably think of Twisted Metal. Today we're going to look at some of the lesser known titles by these guys, see how they may relate to the Twisted Metal series, and we're going to give them a little bit of a rating. Have you ever been playing Twisted Metal and thought to yourself, wow, this is fun, but there's just not enough water? Well, Single Track's got you covered with Critical Depth. I guess we didn't get any voice lines because we're underwater. Is that an entire pirate ship driving underwater here with me? And you know they're serious about this one because they put "from the developers who know vehicular combat" right here on the cover.
Something must be.
Whoa! This was published by GT Interactive, who are also kind enough to let you know about Duke Nukem coming to the PlayStation. Critical Depth is, for all intents and purposes, Twisted Metal underwater. You get 12 submarines to pick from, all ranging from different environmentalist groups, government agencies, and pirates. All fighting to get control of these magical orbs that were dropped by these alien beings. And this is where this game puts on a little bit of a twist from the classic Twisted Metal formula, and this is going to come up again in a later game we talk about. You also get character bios from each of those characters, kind of showing where they're from and what their motivations are, and that kind of helps with the world building a little bit.
Your choice of a mate is imperfect.
So you got 3 game modes in here, like a lot of the other games in this series. You got your basic story mode, you got a challenge mode, and then you got a deathmatch mode. So in the deathmatch mode, it's the classic be the last one alive mode. But in the challenge and story modes, it's got a little bit of a different thing going on here. In the story mode, you got to collect these orbs that are scattered throughout the map. Everybody's fighting to get control of these 5 pods. The environmentalist group wants to grab them and protect them so that they can thrive naturally. The CIA wants to get them so they can dispose of them. And then you got other characters trying to gain them for power. Because you see, every time you pick up one of these orbs in the map, it gives you a special ability, whether that's extra health, more firepower, stronger damage. If you're able to obtain all 5 orbs, you're kind of like this extra powerful force on the battlefield. It kind of adds a new layer of strategy to the game. It was never too overpowered or off-putting, but it's just an extra thing that's kind of there.
Looks like some kind of realistic structure.
And you actually have 2 ways of beating the levels in this game. Pick up all the 5 orbs and then exit through the teleporter that'll activate when you grab them, or destroy everybody and pick all the orbs up. The latter being the most reasonable option because there was never a time where I could get all 5 of them and then dip out. I think the closest I got was like 4, but they kept knocking them off of me. When it comes down to the gameplay, you got your standard array of power missiles, homing missiles, special attacks. Your special attacks are usually pretty effective, but you gotta wait for them to recharge. What you would be used to as the machine gun in Twisted Metal games has been replaced with a torpedo that kind of just slowly shoots in a straight line. But you can also pick up a shaker missile. This item will let you hit the enemies with a shaker and it'll shake the orbs off of them so you can pick them up. And this is what happened to me a lot whenever I tried to just grab all 5 orbs. And in the story mode, you get 3 lives, and once those lives are over, you're done for the rest of the game. Sound familiar? The game's going to play quite differently depending on the person that you pick. You can get that sleek manta ray from the CIA, or you got a dude that's just a surfer scuba diver. He's like holding onto this glider and he's just out in the open. When he takes damage, he'll actually lose a foot, which I thought was a weird detail, but yeah, that's a thing. And when you're in the world playing in these arenas, there's quite a bit of variety going on here. You got the underwater level, and then you got the underwater level, and then you got this other one where you're in the ocean. I think the coolest level that I played was a city that was sunken underground and you had these really tall skyscrapers peeking above the surface. And in these levels, you can actually surface your submarine above the water, which I thought was a pretty cool touch. And sometimes there'll actually be power-ups that are kind of sitting above the water that you kind of got to dolphin dive upwards to grab. But you can also do things like break through walls and some of the glass windows of these skyscrapers to get different power-ups. So there's a little bit of destructibility in the level. And even though it's underwater, you got a good bit of verticality, so you can go up really high, up to the surface, or you can go down deep. But if you go down too deep, you got a little meter that shows how deep you're going, and if you go too deep, you're reaching the critical depth, hence the name of the game, and you'll start taking a little bit of damage. Can't go too far out of bounds now. They tried to do some interesting stuff with the engine. You can have this autopilot mode where the game will kind of steer for you and you can just shoot. I thought it was kind of interesting that you could turn off the HUD in this game. It seemed really random. Like in every game now you can do that and it's just a standard feature, but never really saw a lot of PlayStation games where you could do that. This kind of just seems like they were playing with the idea of taking the Twisted Metal formula and putting it into different types of games. And clearly this game didn't get the same budget as its Twisted Metal counterparts because the endings of the game are really cheap. It's like 1 or two images that have been cropped in and the images just kind of being panned around. The voice acting's pretty rough. Every time you win the game, you're talking to the aliens, and they just use this really bad voice filter over it with this kind of like flange effect.
We will wipe you from the face of the earth.
Is it flange or flange? I don't. Also, there's really no other animated cutscenes in the game besides the intro one, which is pretty badass. And there's no voice acting for the characters, so in between levels you'll have this internal text monologue that pops up that kind of shows what your character's thinking. I'm glad they did that, but it's not the same as having a legitimate cutscene there. Unless you're a submarine enthusiast, you might be passing on this one.
We will satisfy your wildest dreams.
I had gotten the suggestion to cover this game in a video, and this is almost the reason that this entire video exists, because when I started looking into this one, I looked down the rabbit hole of all the other ones, and that game is War of the Monsters. War of the Monsters is an arena-style fighting game that takes heavy inspiration from classic monster movies like Godzilla or King Kong. Uh-oh, watch out. I'm a big scary monster, and I'm destroying the city. You'll instantly notice this art style as soon as you start the game with that drive-in movie start screen, and when you go to load your game, it'll go into the movie film room, which is pretty cool. But to prime you for the experience, when you start the game, it starts off with this wild ass intro of aliens taking over the earth, and you're having this battle between the aliens and the humans.
Oh my god.
Ultimately, you start finding that these monsters are being developed in a laboratory, and they get out and they start going crazy. That's about all the build-up you need for a game like this. It's not too story-rich, it's just about some mindless monster fun. You got a full cast of characters inspired by Transformer robots. You got your obvious Godzilla and King Kong knockoffs. You got the Neversoft mascot. You can fight as a gigantic ant if you want to. You can clearly see what they were going for with this, and it's a really good art style, honestly. It's the best part of this game. You got a full cast of exotic sci-fi locations and cities with tall skyscrapers to fight in. You can climb up the buildings. You can destroy every single building and level the whole area out. And you yourself or your enemy can easily get crushed by some of these buildings, which I thought was pretty crazy. But your environment is a tool in this game. You can pick up cars in the environment and throw them. You can grab helicopters out the air. And when you climb and scale these buildings and adventure around the map, you'll find health and energy pickups. Your fighting system is pretty simple. You got your counters, you got your long range attacks, your short throw attacks. You can shoot projectiles, and you'll actually change the way you hit based on the directional pad you're pushing when you're fighting. I like that you can grapple the enemies, hit them a couple times, throw them on top of a skyscraper. And it's of course developed by the Twisted Metal developers, Incog Entertainment, and you'll notice a few remnants of that Twisted Metal engine being used here. Some of the UI and the menus are similar, and there's some similar sound effects, but outside of that, this plays nothing like a Twisted Metal. But in classic Twisted Metal fashion, you'll notice a theme here, and I don't know what it is about them doing this, but anytime you go to play a single player mode, you get 3 game modes. You get your single player story, you get like a deathmatch, and then you get some other special mode, and it's like they do this 3 game mode system. I don't know, just thought that was kind of funny. So you got your story mode, one-on-one battle, or you can do a battle with up to 3 people. Kind of weird that you can have a battle with 3 monsters, but you can only do 2-player split screen. Your adventure mode is pretty standard fighting game story with not much of a story, but you'll get a little cutscene before and after the match. Just like in Twisted Metal, you get 3 lives, and once you're out of those, you're just kind of screwed for the rest of the game. What I did find is that this game is just relentlessly hard. I was losing the game within the first level. You know, your tutorial level, I was just getting my ass handed to me there. In the second level of the game, they're wiping your health down by fighting a monster, and then once you finally beat that monster, they're just like, oh hey, here's another one to fight in the same level. There's some unlocks you can get for playing through the story and whatnot. You can unlock characters and different costumes and stuff, but I never got that far because I didn't get that far into the story. And to be honest, the gameplay was just a little clunky in my opinion. I don't know why, it just felt like it wasn't fully fleshed out. If I was trying to do a grapple, the actual grapple animation would just kind of freeze you in place, and it would take a second to actually go through the cycle. I just kind of felt like there was a delay between what I was doing and what was happening on the screen, and it just felt like it was taking forever for my punches to connect, and that was even if I could, because the AI was just wiping the floor with me. Maybe there's just a little bit of a learning curve to it. Maybe I just wasn't really into the fighting in this game. You would definitely be into this game if you were into, I guess, old monster movies. There's definitely a niche audience for this one, but I just didn't enjoy the fighting so much myself. Pretty neat game. This might be the weirdest one we have in our list. It's the only platformer, and it's an officially licensed game by Scholastic. This is Animorphs Shattered Reality. Now, if you're familiar with Animorphs, you would know there was a little bit of a TV series for this, and it was a book series that was probably sold at your school or something. I'm not too familiar with this one, to be honest with you, but looking at some of the source material, it's kind of weird that this was a kid's thing, because it's very creepy. It's probably the creepiest game that we're looking at on this list, ironically, because it's geared towards children. Like, I don't know what's going on in this TV series, but you can just look at some of this and it's a little odd. So there's aliens and the kids turn into animals because they gotta fight the aliens or something. And that's pretty much all you need to know. Oh, damn, what's happening to me? I'm transforming. This is crazy. Hey, what's up, guys? I'm a cat now. So you're playing as a cast of characters that are all individually voice acted and they all have their own witty quips as they're going through the level. You can pick who you want to play as.
What are these? These nuts?
They all play exactly the same. Your platformer is your basic bog standard platformer. There's a 3D element to it, so sometimes you're going straight ahead and sometimes you're just going side to side.
Whoa!
You're picking up these A tokens, which seem to do absolutely nothing. I don't know if they give you an extra life or not, but I didn't notice that I ever did. The most interesting thing about this game and the selling point of this is that you can turn into an animal to fight the enemies. Problem is that in this game, they're just these basic little arena sections that are very obvious. You'll be running through the level and then there'll be this very obvious patch where there's a monster running around and then you'll turn into the animal that you are and fight the monster.
Next time, pick up somebody your own size.
Huh?
You can hold a button to lock onto them and then there's one attack button and that's basically it. There's no strategy to it. It's very much tap them, step back, tap them, step back. Oh, look, you won the battle. There's a timer that counts down as you're playing as the animal, but I don't think that this matters because you're never gonna run out of time before you beat the 1 or 2 enemies on the screen. And again, there's no integral gameplay feature where you're switching between the animal and the person constantly, or you're using it to get to certain parts in the level. It's just simply run through the basic platformer level, come up to this little section where you fight one monster, keep platforming.
Boy, that's a long way down.
Other than the little part in the intro where they say the kids that can turn into animals gotta save the day against the bad guys, the alien things. There's really no other explanation for what you're doing in the story or the level. You're just going into random area, then you move into next random area. There's no cutscenes in between, there's no dialogue, there's nothing. This game feels like the most basic nothing game there is. This definitely feels like they were just doing it for a paycheck. Like, you could have told me that this game was entirely AI generated and I would have believed you, which is kind of sad because it seems like they're working on a pretty cool concept. The IP seems like it has more to offer with the characters and stuff, but I think the budget and the passion just wasn't there on this one. We fought on land and we fought on sea, but now we're taking it to the skies with Warhawk for the PlayStation 1.
Commander?
This is Commander Jessic.
Hey, when you send your guys out on this flight, could you have them bring back some chilies? Also, why are we talking on headphones? This has to be one of the oldest games in the series. This was back in 1995. I think this was before any Twisted Metal. According to Google, Warhawk released 5 days after Twisted Metal. How's that for a release window? And this is definitely one of those early PlayStation games, you know, where they're figuring the 3D graphics out, and it really shows with this game. I don't think there's any saving. This is when you were using passwords to save your game. Animorphs was definitely my second least played game in the series, and this was my first. I think I played a total of 7 minutes on this.
Nothing like a little search and destroy, right, Hatch?
I just wasn't into it. I gotta be honest. You got the cockpit view, and maybe at the time this was really, really cool and a standout feature, but there's not really a whole lot of risk in your flight. You can just run into walls, you can run into the ground, you take 0 damage, you just kind of bounce off the floor. It feels kind of cheap. There's not really a whole lot going on with the enemies, and I was kind of confused as to what to do in the mission. I think I was supposed to fly around and find this thing, or maybe I was supposed to eliminate everybody, but I just couldn't figure anything out. The game wasn't very pretty to look at, but it does have one saving grace: live action cutscenes.
I don't like mysteries, Corporal. They have a way of killing people.
You start the game off and you got this live action sequence playing out with real people. I don't know if this is something that carried through the entire game because, again, I didn't play through it. I know, real high quality game review here. Let's just find out how much of this was actually in the game. We're gonna do this together. Warhawk cutscenes. Okay, so it looks like there's 14 minutes of live action cutscenes in this game, which is really neat for a game from 1995. Dude, I love this late 90s mix of CGI and live action stuff. Look at this missile. Looks so realistic. These guys are definitely on this ship. If I'm being honest, it looks very Halo-esque, actually. So if you're into cheesy CGI cutscenes, this might be something that you're interested in. If you like flight simulator gameplay that's not really a simulator, I didn't enjoy playing this game at all, but this is pretty neat. If you want a game that fully embodies early 2000s angst, look no further than Downhill Domination. Take your player of questionable stereotype from the top all the way to the bottom with this high-octane mountain bike racer. The goal is to get to the finish line by any means necessary, and I mean by any means necessary. If you gotta punch one of the other players right out of the gate, then do it. Throw a water bottle at them even. You gotta avoid all the environmental hazards like those poor elderly people walking up the mountain while there's a mountain bike tournament going on for some reason, or the Jeeps that are rock climbing. And you always gotta deal with those Jeep owners, even in a video game. This game is fast and it's intense. There's a crazy sense of speed here. There's constantly something going on in the level, whether it's a helicopter spinning out of control or a rainstorm that just came out of nowhere. You got some cool weather effects going on. You got a lot of verticality naturally because you're going down all of these hills. The game's very similar to SSX, like actually extremely similar. You got a boost meter where you just magically pedal faster if you have to, and you fill that boost meter up by doing tricks or by knocking out the other players, of course. You get weapons as you're riding and you can upgrade them as you're playing. Like you can have a stick that you can knock people out with, but the ultimate weapon is the water bottles where you're actually throwing a projectile at them. And for some reason, you can throw them at the people I can too, for whatever reason. F those guys. Other riders getting in your way? Well, I'll show you how to stop them with one simple trick. I'm trying to look in the manual here to figure this game out because I'm still confused about the game modes they have on offer. If you have friends, you can actually play up to 4-player split screen if you can convince them to play a downhill mountain bike game. But it gets kind of muddy when you start to get into the single player game modes. You got like a career, then you got a super career, then you got a custom tournament, then you got time trials, an arcade mode, free ride mode, which I guess that's self-explanatory. There's also apparently a super jump mode that you can unlock where you're just focused on getting some monster air and doing a bunch of tricks. Or you can go mosh bowling with punches, kicks, hip checks, sticks, and bottles. I thought the tricks were really basic in this game, but I guess it turns out that I'm an idiot because there's a whole list of tricks you can do right here. It's hilarious to make your character bail on these tricks because they'll just go ragdolling down the mountain whenever you mess up, so that's always entertaining. Select from 14 distinct riders. Yeah, distinct is the word I guess we'll use. You got a lot of different tracks and sections of the track you can play. I don't know if the campaign is just like one huge mountain with different sections in it, kind of like SSX, or there's just a million different mountains. You got a broadcaster that'll do a drone shot throughout the mountain while they're commentating what the race is about to be like. I was talking to the field medics earlier, like, oh no, there's high temperatures outside. They might have a heat stroke or something. We're still not providing them with any water bottles. Good luck with the Jeeps coming up the mountain. Hope you don't have a head-on collision. And the game actually has a banging ass soundtrack. I think one of the coolest things about this game that surprised me is that there's actually real sponsorships for real bike brands in this game, which is pretty cool. As you're winning races, you'll get cash for these upgrades that you'll use in the shop in between races. And I guess the way you're getting this cash is through the sponsorships from eBay and Amazon in the racetracks. I think it's kind of funny to see those. When did did this game come out? Early 2000s? I mean, dude, that had to have been when eBay and Amazon were like in their infancy. They were like in their come up phase. Ironically, I bought this game from eBay. It's actually a Blockbuster copy that I guess was never returned, so that's fun.
Close, but no cigar.
The one thing that really sucks about this game is the audio mix. It just sounds pretty terrible in my opinion. I tried to adjust some of the different volume sliders in the menu, but I just couldn't get it to sound right to me. Ultimately though, pretty fun ass game. I paid probably less for this than I did for Animorphs. I think it was like $5, and for that, that's a pretty banging ass game for the price. I mean, it's SSX with bikes, so if you like bikes and you like SSX, go for it. Following the theme of racing games, I think I got one of the most creative racing games that's ever been created right here, Jet Moto 2. This is part of a trilogy in the series, but I picked this one specifically because this is the one that I'm familiar with. I actually played this one as a kid, and it's the only one I've played, so I figured we'll go back to this one. If you'd like to see me cover the trilogy though, you can drop that in the comments. Jet Moto 2 is an abstract circuit racing games where you're racing on these hover bikes. That's really the best way I can describe it. They're these weird, futuristic things with no wheels, but they look like motorcycles and they got a big jet engine on the back of them. You got a very diverse group of characters with totally different stats, and these stats do actually really matter when it comes to the gameplay. You get character bios, so you can actually look a little bit deeper into the lore of these characters and what their motivations are for racing. Every character has a different sponsor, and the sponsors are kind of funny because they're all made up except for Mountain Dew. For some reason, Mountain Dew is just randomly in this game. Oh, my head, where am I? According to the doctor's notes here, you've been in a coma for the last 3 weeks, but don't worry, we have just the thing to get you right on track. Drink some of this. Wow, I feel so much better now, doctor, and I also feel like playing Jet Moto 2. Thanks a lot. Pretty cool aesthetic though. I like the Mountain Dew colorway. After you select your character, you got a few different selections of what you can do for the game modes. You got a full season where you can race through all of the tracks in a single tournament. You can do a custom tournament where you can pick the tracks that you can race. You can do a single track, or you can do a practice. Or you can go head to head with a friend if you can convince them to play a hover bike game. When it comes down to the track design, this is where it really starts to get crazy. You could be in a desert, or you could be in a jungle, or you could be in a city post-earthquake, or you could literally be in heaven and hell. That's a real track in this game. It's wild. There's this crazy sense of speed. You'll be knocking into all of the track barriers, and a lot of the tracks actually will play out in reverse. So you'll get to a certain point in the track, then you'll have to flip around, do a 180, and go into oncoming traffic. The stats come into play here because remember that I said that there was a weight stat in the game. There's a lot of jumps and high altitude falls in this game where you'll find yourself midair shifting your weight to make sure that you actually land properly. When you're driving, you can either turn left to right, or you can really lean into it and shift your weight to do a hard turn. And when you're in midair, this comes into play because you can shift your weight in every direction to make sure that you actually land how you're supposed to land. And this game is very unforgiving when it comes to your landing. You'll constantly find yourself falling off the bike. At first I was like, damn man, this game is really unforgiving, but then I kind of started to feel like I was getting the hang of it, and there's still a lot of parts in the levels where it's just straight up punishing to you, but you really get a sense of accomplishment when you actually start to get good at the tracks. That's not to say there aren't parts in the tracks that are just gonna screw you over all the time, because there is, but you know, it just comes with it. And one little interesting detail about the tracks in the game that I didn't notice until now is that when you're actually looking at the loading screens, there'll be just a little description over in the corner telling you what the track's about, usually pretty comical. If ad-friendly. Tracks can be easy, this is the easiest. Don't be lulled into a false sense of security though, otherwise you'll find yourself in a lava flow you can't get out of. Yeah, there's tracks in this game they call ad-friendly tracks, so that gives you a sense of the difficulty in the tracks in this game. The shaft. Need we say more?
Need I say more, you feel me?
Yeah, you really get shafted on some of these tracks. Ultimately, Jet Moto 2 has to be one of the most fun and creative games on this list, and I just love the artwork. Some of the artwork can be contributed to Sal Valletta, which was actually an artist that worked on some of the Marvel and DC stuff, to give you an idea of what we were working with here. This is the kind of thing that makes me wish there was more story in this, more art, or just maybe more fleshed out characters, because I want more of the characters. But yeah, Jet Moto 2, a game that has your dad sponsored by Mountain Dew in it. Pretty swag money. I'm like alternating Mountain Dew and coffee. What the hell is wrong with me? If you stuck around this far, I'm glad, because I got a banger for you, and if you're a single track or Twisted Metal fan, you probably knew this one was coming. From the million-selling developer of Car Combat, they put that one on this case too, because that's how you know it's good. We got Road Trip Vacation 2012.
Take a vacation!
And this game answers the question, what if we took Twisted Metal and Crazy Taxi and we mashed it together and put it in a post-apocalyptic Fallout setting? Alrighty mate, hop on in. Also, you might want this because it's gonna get a little bumpy back there. Oh my god, are you Deke from Fear Effect? In this one, I got the really cool Blockbuster Video rental edition. It's got the rent code in. Duke Nukem, it's coming to the PlayStation. Gotta be sure to pick that one up.
We fight the fight, so you can see the sights.
This game feels like Single Track's magnum opus. It feels like they took everything they learned from their previous games and their other experiments, and they mashed it all together to make probably one of the best games I've played on the PlayStation.
Our tricked out battle rigs are fully loaded attack vehicles. armed to the teeth and ready for anything Big Daddy can throw at us.
I might even go as far to say this is better than Twisted Metal. So this game takes place in 2012, where we all know the world ends in 2012. It's post-apocalyptic, the world's destroyed, everything's in shambles, but if you got money, you can still visit all of those hotspot tourist attractions.
Aren't you glad you can afford it?
You can stay in a luxury resort, you can get all the whining and dining that you want, but if you're less fortunate, you're gonna wanna call up an auto mercenary to still do all the fun tourist attraction stuff that you wanna do.
These professional party crashers will hijack you on a high-speed, high-thrill, totally unauthorized vacation deep into the very heart of Big Daddy Land. And at a fraction of the cost.
And this is where you come into play. You're an auto mercenary, so your job is to pick up these tourists and show them around, show them a good time.
Thought it was bigger.
Take them to all the tourist attractions, the photo spots, let them get their photos, and make as much money as you can in the process. You got a huge cast of characters like every other game in this list. There's a character bio that you can open up to see what all these characters are about. You got an Elvis impersonator, of course you do. You got a cross-dresser and a PT Cruiser. You got a lot of steampunk-inspired, aesthetically influenced characters going on here. I'm just making up words as I'm going, if you can't tell. You got ad-friendly. None. I forgot about this one. I just realized it looking at the gameplay again. Oh yeah, you got an Oscar Mayer Wiener truck in here too, but it's a car. Oscar Mayer Wiener car. You take these cars and you take them across America on a road trip or a rogue trip. You visit everything from the Vegas Strip to Washington DC, go out to the sunny hills of California. There's a lot going on here, and tonally and aesthetically, the art style is super consistent.
Stupid earthling.
Everything just mashes together perfectly. The characters fit perfectly into the world. It doesn't take itself too seriously. The levels are bright and colorful, and they all play a lot differently from one another. You might be in a small arena, or you might be in a big open map with a bunch of hills. The game's very fun and campy, and it reminds me a lot of that idea that they had with Twisted Metal when it came to taking Sweet Tooth on a road trip across America.
There was this great shot of him pushing this little, 5-day-old.
So you jump into the map and you pick up a tourist. Once you pick up that tourist, you'll have a meter running that'll accumulate money as you're driving them around, but that only goes up to a certain point. If you want more money than that, you're gonna have to go and stop at the photo spots that are spread across the map. But of course, it's not that simple. Everybody's gonna be fighting over this one tourist because they wanna make the money from them too. How are they gonna get that? Well, they're either gonna destroy your car or they're going to use a shaker missile to knock the tourist out. Does that sound familiar? At first I was a little worried about this tourist element. I was like, how big of a factor is that gonna play into the game? Well, on the surface, you don't have to do that at all. You just gotta focus on destroying all the other cars like you would in any other Twisted Metal title, and you'll win the level. About halfway through the game, or a couple times in the game, when you're playing the story mode, you'll have a boss battle that you have to fight, and it's pretty bog standard stuff. There's multiple secret characters and stuff you can unlock for beating the story mode, and when you beat it, they'll give you a trophy that'll actually give you an unlock code that you'll put in the menu, which I thought was pretty funny.
It may not seem like much, but if you look close, you'll see the real reward.
The whole point to the tourist element to the game is it just adds another layer of strategy. You can play the game and technically completely ignore it, but the whole tourist element comes into play because you're gonna wanna have money for upgrades and, more importantly, health. There's these little posts that you drive through to upgrade your weapons and get more health, and you're gonna need money to get more health. So instead of just having to drive around and hope that you can pick up a health pickup, you actually have to accumulate more money, and if you have that money, you get more health, aka you get a leg up on the competition. When it comes down to the gameplay, you may have noticed this, but it plays exactly like a Twisted Metal title, almost to a T, literally. You got all the missiles that you would want. You got your homing missiles, your power missiles, your mortar strike. Oh, you got all the missiles. You got meteor strike, but that's the mortar strikes, but it's meteors. You got this sick-ass drone missile that you can control. You got your machine guns that'll overheat and need to recharge, but you can use them as much as you want. And you also got your special abilities that you could use with your D-pad or by pushing both of the shoulder buttons together, like using a shield or using a jump to jump over stuff in the map. Oddly enough though, my game didn't come with a manual. It came with this little insert that just gives you a link to the hotline that obviously no longer works, so I never figured out how to use the shield. The whole game's quirky and doesn't take itself too seriously, and you'll notice that with the tourists that you pick up too.
To action!
You can pick up an alien, or you can pick up a grandma, and they'll all have little voice lines when you pick them up or you take them to a photo spot, which were kind of sparse. I wish there was a little bit more going on there, but it's still a cute feature. And the maps are all pretty fun to play. They have a decent amount of verticality. The scaling is a little weird on them, but I think that it's like that in literally every single Twisted Metal title ever. But the variety in the levels you play are just so good, man. You can go to a post-apocalyptic New York, you can go to what looks like Orlando Beach, you can go to Yellowstone National Park where you can fall into the dam and explode. It's just so creative, it's fun, it keeps you on your feet, the soundtrack is banging ass, everything just totally fits so perfectly. It's just a perfect sandwich. You can actually play this all the way up to 4 players. I'm not really sure how this can handle 4 player because it already runs at like 30 FPS with 1 player. Rogue Trip feels like a game that they went all in on, but because it didn't have the Twisted Metal name attached to it, I don't think that it did as well as Twisted Metal, because this is a game that I didn't even hear about ever. I just found it when I was searching for other games that were made by them. If you haven't played Rogue Trip, but you're a fan of the Twisted Metal series, this is a must play, 100%. If you don't play any other game on this list and you're into Twisted Metal, you gotta play Rogue Trip.
It's that simple. Go get yourself a tourist. And start showing him the sight.
If you don't have the hardware, emulate it. If you do have the hardware and you want to pick up a physical copy, you can still get it fairly cheap. This might be one of the more pricier games on the list, but I still think it's only like 20, 30 bucks. So yeah, this is a badass game, dude. I really like this one. This was surprising.
This has been a totally illegal, unpaid announcement for the Amalgamated Association of Auto Mercenaries. We now return you to your regularly scheduled crap. Oh my God. Oh!
This obviously isn't the entire catalog of games, but this is kind of what I handpicked out to be some of the best ones to talk about. We could also talk about how Eat Sleep Play turned into a mobile company, or we could talk about some of the other games like the Warhawk reboot that was only online that we couldn't play, or we could talk about the Jet Moto trilogy in general. But for now, I'm gonna let future me give these games a rating. Shout out to Joking Bomb and the Arcade Racer for joining as channel members, as well as to the other channel members supporting the channel. If you want to support me directly and see some of the stuff that doesn't make its way into the final cut of some of these videos, the best way you can do that is by becoming a channel member. But I'm extremely grateful for every one of you guys that even take the time to watch these videos in general. The fact that I can just add a little bit of value to your day is really awesome to me. If you're new here, I covered Twisted Metal and Twisted Metal Black. You can go check those ones out, and recently covered GTA 4. Otherwise, I think we gotta call it here, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you on the next one. It's been T. I'm gonna show you how to stop them with one simple trick.